Hi, good day everyone, especially to our beloved instructor, Mr. Michael Mark Cusin. By the way, my name is Joven Bayadog, a BEd for students of NEGROS Oriental State University, SIATON campus. Now today, what I'm gonna do now is I'm going to discuss my assigned topic report, which is the 3.3, the Speech Act and Communications, under by Module 3, Communications and Context, Experiencing Oral Communications. So now please watch this. So the title topic, which is the Speech Act Theory and Communications. So now let us define what is Speech Act Theory. Speech Act Theory is a theory of language initially proposed by the analytic philosopher John Langshaw Austin. John Langshaw Austin was a British philosopher of language and leading proponent of ordinary language philosophy, perhaps best known for developing the theory of speech act. John Langshaw Austin in 1911 to 1960 was White's professor of moral philosophy at the University of Oxford. He made a number of contributions in various areas of philosophy, including important work on knowledge, perception, action, freedom, truth, language, and the use of language and speech act. The speech act theory considers language as a sort of actions rather than a medium to convey and express. The contemporary speech act theory developed by John Langshaw Austin, a British philosopher of languages, and he introduced this theory in 1975 in his well-known book of How Do Things with Words. Later, John Searle brought the aspect of the theory into much higher dimensions. This theory is often used in the field of philosophy of languages. Austin is the one who came up with the findings that people not only uses the language to assert things but also to do things, and people who followed him went to greater depth based on this point. The speech act theory is a subfield of pragmatics that studies how words are used not only to present information but also to carry out actions. The speech act theory is a theory of meaning that holds the meaning of linguistic expression can be explained in terms of the rules governing their use in performing various speech acts. Example, admonishing, asserting, commanding, exclaiming, promising, questioning, requesting, and warning. So in contrast to the theories that maintain the linguistic expressions have meaning and virtue of the contribution to the throat condition of the sentences where they occur. It explains linguistic meaning in terms of the use of words and sentences in the performance of speech acts. So the speech act theory is very important because it is a commonplace in everyday interactions, and are important for communications as well as present in many different contexts. Also, speech act theory accounts for an act that a speaker performs when pronouncing an utterance, which thus serves functions in communications. A speech act is an utterance that serves functions in communications. We perform speech act when we offer an apology, greetings, request, complaint, invitation, compliment, or refusal. So in the philosophy of language and linguistics, speech act is something expressed by an individual that not only present information but performs an actions as well in order for better understanding. In speech act theory can be defined as the idea that language contains meaning beyond just the definitions of the words that are used. Language is a tool to perform various functions, also called speech acts. So speech act theory suggests that the meaning of what we say is influenced by the type of speech it is, the structure of the utterance, and the context in which it is used. It also explains how speech can create an action or outcome. This theory is a part of the field of pragmatics, which is the study of how language is used in a social context. So the major task for the theory of speech acts is to account for how speakers can succeed in what they do despite the various ways in which linguistic meaning underdetermines use. So in general, speech acts are acts of communication. So in the philosophy of language and linguistic, speech act is something expressed by an individual, not only presents information but forms an action as well. For example, would like the kimchi. Could you please pass it to me? Is considered a speech act as it expresses the speaker's desire to acquire the kimchi, as well as presenting a request that someone pass the kimchi to them. Therefore, one important area of pragmatic is that of speech act, which are communicative acts that convey an intended language functions. A speech act is any utterance that serves a functions in communications. For example, speech can be used to make statements, ask questions, apologize, describe, or persuade, among many other uses. In a speech act, words are used to do something, not just to say something. Aside from that, speech acts are an important marker of the communications competence of an individual. It's because they represent key moments of linguistic and nonverbal expressions when the speaker's intention must be communicated properly within a cultural context. So a speech act theory is a theory of meaning that holds the meaning of linguistic expressions, can be explained in terms of the rules governing their use and performing various speech acts, such as example, admonishing, asserting, commanding, exclaiming, promising, questioning, requesting, and warning. Or a speech act is a utterance that serves a functions in communications. We perform speech act when we offer an apology, greeting, request, complaint, invitation, compliment, or refusal. Their language plays an important role in our daily lives. It functions as a medium to transfer information, exchange ideas, and give opinions verbally. So according to Surley in 1976, the act of performing speech acts implies speaking a language. The act of creating statements, commanding, and questioning are all part of speech acts. In simple terms, speech acts are in fact the basic units of linguistic communications. Speech acts are not mere artificial linguistic constructions, but rather go together with the inquiry of context, which is important to decode a whole utterances and its meaning. So, in general, speech acts are acts of communications. To communicate is to express a certain attitudes, and the type of speech act being performed corresponds to the type of attitudes being expressed. For example, a statement expresses a belief, a request expresses a desire, an apology expresses a regret. As an act of communications, a speech act succeeds if the audience identifies in accordance with the speaker's intentions, the attitudes being expressed. So now further, Austin divides his linguistic act into three different categories. So they are locutionary acts, allocutionary acts, and prelocutionary acts. So John Langshaw Austin, in his framework, locution is what was said and meant, and allocution is what was done, and prelocution is what happened as a result. Locutionary act, this is the act of saying something. It has meaning and it creates an understandable utility to convey or express. A locutionary act or a locutionary speech act in John Langshaw Austin definition is the part of an utterance which is the thing which is actually being said. In other words, one can define as a locutionary act as the act of producing sounds that have meaning. Locutionary act is the basic of utterance itself, the actual of the world. So, in speech act theory, a locutionary act is the act of making a meaningful utterance. Locutionary act is the basic of act utterance or producing a meaningful linguistic expression, as well as locutionary speech act is roughly equivalent to uttering certain utterance with certain sense and reference. So the good examples of sentence which are locutionary acts are any utterances which simply contain a meaningful statement about objects. For example, the baby is crying or the sky is blue. Other examples of locutionary acts can help us understand them is linguistic terms of meaning and references, such as example sentences include, there is a dog over there, or Jack loves Jill. So in the first example, stating that the baby is crying, which is something is referring to the baby's condition or her mood. Maybe she or he is sleepy or hungry. That is why the baby is crying. The next one, the sky is blue. So it's something is referring to the color of the sky, which is the sky is clear, no clouds, no rain is coming, or the weather has a good conditions, and etc. That is why the color of the sky is blue. And for Jack loves Jill is something referring to their feelings and emotion. So that is why it's called locutionary acts. It has a meaning and it creates an understandable utility to convey or express or producing a meaningful linguistic expression. Another one example, it's so dark in this room, so the box is heavy. So the above two sentences represent the actual condition. The first sentence refers to lighting of the room and the second sentence refers to the weight of the box. Once again, in order to give a good example of locutionary acts, you need to simplify of a sentence that has meaning and is the meaning part of the sentences which is locutionary. Locutionary acts can be discussed in two parts: utterance acts and professional acts. An utterance act is a speech act that consists of the verbal employment of units of expressions, such as words and sentences. And utterance is a particular actions performed by a particular speaker at a definite time and place. In spoken language analysis, an utterance is the smallest unit of speech. It is continuous piece of speech beginning and ending with a clear pause. So, in linguistics, a speech act is a utterance defined in terms of the speaker's intentions and the effect it has on a listener. Essentially, it is the actions that the speaker hopes to provoke in his or her audience. Speech acts might be requests, warnings, promises, apologies, greetings, or any number of declarations. So, for example, when someone says, "I'll be back," represents the speaker's promise that she and he will be back. Another one example, when someone says, "Don't be shy, my home is your home." So the utterance represents the speaker expressions that he and she welcome someone. Whereas professional acts are clear and expressive with a specific definable point, as opposed to mere utterance acts, which may be meaningless sounds. So a professional act is a speech act that a speaker performs when referring or predicting in a utterance. The following utterances all have the same propositional acts, despite their different elocutionary acts, utterance acts, and perlocutionary acts. You go home. Do you go home? Go home. So another one example. For example, the following utterances would have the same propositional content. Will John leave the room? John will leave the room. John leave the room. Would that John leave the room? And if John will leave the room, I'll leave also. Elocutionary act, it is performed as an act of saying something or as an act of opposed to saying something. The elocutionary utterance has a certain force of it. It will versed with certain tones, attitudes, feelings, or emotions. There will be an intentions of the speakers or other in elocutionary utterance. It is often used as tone of warning in day-to-day life. So, the elocutionary acts are linguistic acts in which one can be said to do something, like stating, denying, or asking, or the elocutionary act is the act of performance in saying something. The elocutionary act is performed via the communicative force of an utterance, such as promising, apologizing, offering. This act is also called the act of doing something, in saying something. The most significant level of action in a speech act is the elocutionary act because the force, which has been desired by the speakers, determines this act. Elocutionary act can be the real descriptions of interactions condition. So, in simple terms, an action taken by a speaker for speaking certain words, for example, action that is promising or threatening. Elocutionary acts of language in which person is said to be doing something, such as stating, denying, or asking. So, in an elocutionary act, it is not just the act of saying something, but the act of saying something for the purpose of, like, stating an opinion, confirming or denying something, and making a prediction, a promise, request issuing an order or decision, give an advice or permission. So the example of elocutionary acts, like I will see you later, we could find three different assumptions of its meaning: prediction, promise, and warning. I promise you to pay back is an elocutionary act as it is communicating. There is too much homework in the subject. It is stating an opinion. I will do my homework later. So it's referring for promising. Go do your homework. So it's stating an order. So another one example. It's too dark in this room. The box is heavy. Based on the examples above, the first sentence shows a request to switch the light in order to see clear. And the second sentence shows a request to lift up the box or to carry up the box. So elocutionary acts are important in communications to express an idea or assertion, which promotes particular types of actions like stating, questioning, requesting, commanding, and threatening. These actions are performed by a speaker when producing an utterance. Or an elocutionary act is one of asserting, demanding, promising, suggesting, and exclaiming. Now let us move on to perlocutionary act. It normally creates a sense of consequential effects on the audiences. The effects may be in the form of thoughts, imagination, feelings, or emotions. The effect upon the addressee is the main characteristic of perlocutionary utterances. So, a perlocutionary act is one of getting somebody to do something, like persuading them to do something, convincing them to think something, scaring, getting them to be afraid, insulting, getting them to be offended, amusing, getting them to laugh. So, perlocutionary acts have an agenda directed at someone else. A perlocutionary act is the result of listening to the hearer when the speaker intends to follow what he is saying. So, the perlocutionary act is the consequent effect on the hearer which the speaker intends should follow from his utterance. A perlocutionary act of naming an action or state of mind brought about or as a result to say something. It is also known as a perlocutionary effect. The examples of perlocutionary acts, which includes persuading, convincing, scaring, enlightening, inspiring, or otherwise affecting the interlocutor. Example of perlocutionary acts. Would you mind closing the window? Look out for a tiger in a jungle. I want you to remain with me. I don't want to be seen with him anymore. I want to convince myself of getting married. Another one example. It is so dark in this room. The box is heavy. So based on the example, it can be inferred that the first sentence is uttered by someone while switching the light on, and the second sentence is done by someone while lifting up the box. Now let us move on to the different types of speech act. So the classification of speech act, which is speech acts, can be classified into the 5 categories as Surly and Levinson in 1983 to 40 states that the classifications are representatives, directives, commissative, expressives, and declarations. So now for the representatives are speech acts that the utterances commit the speaker to the throat of the expressed proposition. The utterances are produced based on the speaker observations of certain things, then followed by stating the fact or opinion based on the observations. When someone says, "She's beautiful," the speaker can state the sentence based on the fact or just give his or her own opinion about physical condition or a person. It is also states what the speaker believes to be the case or not. Statements of fact, assertion, conclusion, and description. Statements of fact, assertion, conclusions, and descriptions are all examples of the speaker representing the world as he or she believes it is. For example, when someone says the earth is flat, it represents the speaker's assertions about the earth. The speaker has opinion that the earth is flat. So for the representative speech act can be noted by some speech act verb such as remind, tell, assert, deny, correct, state, gaze, predict, report, describe, inform, insist, assure, agree, claim, believes, and conclude. Now for the directives area speech act that speaker uses to get someone else to do something. These speech acts include requesting, questioning, command, orders, and suggesting. For example, when someone says, "Could you lend me a pencil, please?" The utterance represents the speaker request that the hearer to do something, which is to lend him a pencil. So for the third one, which is the commissations. Commissations are speech acts that the utterances commit the speaker to some future course of actions. This includes promising, threatening, offering, refusal, pledges. For example, when someone says, "I'll be back," represent the speaker's promise that she and he will be back. Now for the fourth one, which is the expressives. Expressives are speech acts that the utterances expresses a psychological state. This speech act including thanking, apologizing, welcoming, and congratulating. For example, when someone says, "Don't be shy, my home is your home," The utterances represents the speaker expressions that he and she welcome someone. Now for the last one is the declarations. The declaration are speech act that the utterances affect immediate changes in the institutional state of affairs and which tend to rely on elaborate extra-linguistic institutions. This speech act include excommunicating, declaring war, pristing, firing from employment. For example, you are dead to me. So now, we are done with the different types of the speech act. So now, what is the main concern of the speech act theory? So speech act theory of meaning that holds that the meaning of linguistic expressions can be explained in terms of the rules governing their use in performing various speech. Example, admonishing, asserting, commanding, exclaiming, promising, questioning, and requesting, as well as warning. So what is the importance of speech act in communications? One important area of pragmatics is that of speech act, which are communicative acts that convey an intended language functions. A speech act is an utterance that serves a functions in communications. We perform speech act when we offer an apology, greeting, request, complaint, invitation, compliment, suggestion, commands, offers, and appropriate responses to those acts or refusal. So the speech acts are acts that refer to the actions performed by produced utterances. People can perform an actions by saying something. Through speech act, the speaker can convey physical actions merely through words and phrases. Therefore, language plays an important role in our daily lives. It functions as a medium to transfer information, exchange ideas, and give opinions verbally. According to Surly, the act of performing speech act implies speaking a language. The act of creating statements, commanding, and questioning are all part of speech act. In simple terms, speech acts are in fact the basic units of linguistic communications. Speech acts are not mere artificial linguistic constructs, but rather go together with the inquiry of context, which is important to decode a whole utterance and its meaning by Surrey, 1976. So now, what is the importance of the speech act theory in teaching? So that the speech act theory and communication is very important, especially in education, because the importance of the speech act theory and communication in teaching is that the highly quality teachers speech act can effectively impart teaching contents, give demonstration, accomplish teaching tasks, and organize the classroom. So as I said earlier, a speech act is any utterance that serve a functions in communication. For example, speech can be used to make statement, ask question, apologize, describe, or persuade, among many other uses. In speech act, words are used to do something, not just to say something. Speech acts are an important marker of the communicative competence of our students because they represent key moments of linguistic and nonverbal expressions when the speaker's intention must be communicated properly without cultural context. So that will be all my topic for this video. I hope you learned something. Thank you and God bless.